On Wednesday, July 3, 1872, tragedy struck the quiet fields of Atwater Township, Ohio. Deep beneath the rolling farmland, a coal mine owned by the newly formed Atwater Coal Company, barely 10 days into full operation, erupted into flames. The fire began near a ventilation furnace, its heat catching the timbered supports that lined the mine shafts. In moments, smoke and fire coursed through the tunnels, trapping workers below. As word spread, miners, townspeople, and firefighters rushed to the site and battled the inferno that refused to yield. For 24 hours, the fire raged unchecked, consuming both air and hope. By the time it was extinguished, 10 people lay dead. That year, instead of 4th of July fireworks, Atwater gathered in silence, its Independence Day marked by grief rising with the smoke from the mine. Today, we are taking a look at the Atwater Coal Company mining disaster of 1872. A disaster that claimed 10 lives, including the life of a 9-year-old boy, and is considered Ohio's very first coal mine disaster. So if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. The grave of 9-year-old George Hufford is one of 10 souls lost in the Atwater mine disaster of 1872. His story, though short, speaks volumes about the lives of working families in that era. George was born the son of George Sr., an English-born miner hardened by the years beneath the earth, and Anne, a Welsh homemaker whose strength held the family together through countless moves. The Huffords' journey took them from New York to Pennsylvania, then north to Ontario before finally settling in Ohio in the late 1860s, chasing the promise of steady work and a better life. By the summer of 1872, young George was nearly 9 years old and eager to follow in his father's footsteps. When the new coal mine opened on the S.G. Shaffer Farm in Atwater Township, he joined his father underground, proud to be seen as one of the men. In those days, before child labor laws and safety regulations, such work was a harsh reality. And for George, it was a rite of passage, a moment to prove his worth in a world where childhood was often brief and burdened with the weight of survival. In the spring of 1871, backed by a capital investment of $300,000, the Atwater Coal Company emerged with bold ambitions. Determined to see a return on their money, the company moved swiftly to open its new mine, cutting through nearly 1,000 square yards of stubborn Ohio earth. An engine house rose on the surface, while below, a vast and perilous labyrinth took shape. A 200-foot slope, a 366-foot vertical shaft, and 2 branching tunnels stretching east and west into the dark. To carry their coal to market, workers laid 2.5 miles of track, linking the mine to the rail hub at Limaville. By the early summer of 1872, the mine pulsed with life. 24 men working shifts around the clock, hewing 70 tons of black rock from the depths each day. Among them was young George Hufford, whose small frame and quick reflexes made him suited to a vital but dangerous task: operating the heavy wooden ventilation doors. In an age before mechanical systems, George's hands literally controlled the mine's breath. By opening and closing those doors, he directed precious currents of air through the shafts, keeping the deeper passages from filling with deadly gas and smoke. It was a job of great responsibility for a boy so young, and one that tragically would place him in the path of disaster. The Atwater mine was considered a feat of modern engineering for its time. Its main slope, 14 feet wide and buttressed with timber, was fitted with iron rails on which loaded coal cars rattled up and down. A carefully built double partition of earth and sawdust separated the air course from the trackway, forming a sealed artery through which fresh air could be drawn deep into the mine. At the base of this slope, pit boss Richard Roberts constructed the heart of the system, a furnace and tall smokestack designed to breathe life into the subterranean labyrinth. The furnace's heat created a natural draft, pulling cool air down one passage and forcing foul gases up through the stack. To guard against the ever-present risk of fire, Roberts had lined the nearby walls and ceiling with sheet iron and kept the surrounding timbers soaked with water. Yet despite every precaution on the afternoon of July 3, 1872, that delicate balance of air and flame turned against them. 16 men and 1 boy descended into the mine, unaware that within hours their world would be swallowed by fire and smoke. Around 2 o'clock, engineer James Howells was riding a mine car near the mouth of the slope when he heard a sudden puff, sharp and unnatural, followed by a low roar. Turning, he saw smoke billowing through the brattice, the partition that separated the trackway from the airway. Howells bolted toward the entrance, shouting down to the pitman below, "The slope's on fire. Get the men out." But the mine was already filling with a suffocating haze that would soon make escape nearly impossible. At the bottom of the slope stood 21-year-old Atwater resident Andrew Strong. It was there, just 3 yards from the furnace, that he first noticed the change. A faint hiss, a flicker of light through the cracks in the wooden partition, followed by the sharp crackle of fire catching dry wood. Strong would recall hearing snapping and cracking and a loud whirl and roaring of the air. A draft so strong it would near pull a man in. He yelled, "Fire! Fire, boys! The slope is on fire!" As the air roared up the passage, he spotted young George Hufford near the doors that controlled the mine's airflow. Desperate, Strong called to him, telling him to warn the others. The boy turned and sprinted down the eastern passage, his voice echoing off the stone. "Fire! Fire!" until it vanished into the depths. But not everyone would remember that moment the same way. The Atwater Historical Society preserved another version, one that casts Andrew Strong's actions in a darker light. According to multiple newspaper accounts, pit boss Richard Roberts had just ordered Strong to toss 2 shovels of coal into the furnace to stoke the fire. Moments later, Strong noticed the smell of burning wood and the first wisps of smoke rising through the brattice. Instead of descending into the mine to warn his fellow workers, Strong ran to the top of the slope. There he found 9-year-old George standing near the entrance and ordered him to go down and alert the men below. Unaware of the danger he was running toward, young George did as he was told, disappearing into the choking darkness from which he would never return. Inside the burning mine, chaos and terror overtook the men. Smoke rolled through the tunnels, filling every passage with suffocating darkness. 42-year-old David Lewis, who had spent more than 3 decades underground, dropped to his knees, pressing his face close to the damp earth, where the air was still breathable. He crawled through the black haze, feeling his way forward as the heat intensified around him. The timber supports groaned and split apart with sharp cracks, sending splinters flying as the fire devoured everything in its path. Somehow, Lewis clawed his way forward, 200 feet of agony and instinct, until the faint light of the entrance shimmered ahead. Not far away, Benjamin Jones, 33 years old and a miner since boyhood, was working deep in the western passage when he heard the panicked shouts echo through the mine. Dropping the reins of his mule, he ran toward the slope, only to be met by a wall of choking smoke. Coughing and half-blinded, Jones fell to his hands and knees, found the cold edge of a T-rail, and began to pull himself along inch by inch. The iron rail became his lifeline through the darkness. When he finally stumbled into the open air, soot-covered and gasping, he joined the growing crowd of survivors collapsing at the mouth of the mine. A piercing steam whistle shattered the quiet of Atwater Township, calling the townspeople from their homes and fields. Within minutes, hundreds gathered. Some shouted orders, others prayed. There was talk of sealing the mine's entrance to smother the fire, but that plan was quickly abandoned. Hope, fragile and stubborn, held that some of the miners might have reached air pockets deeper in the shafts. As long as there was a chance, no one above ground could bring themselves to entomb the men still trapped below. A desperate telegram raced through the wires to nearby Ravenna, Ohio, summoning every available hand. Within hours, the town's entire fire department, along with its mayor, arrived in Atwater, hauling a steam engine and hose carts through the night. The exhausted volunteers worked frantically, forcing jets of water down into the smoking shaft, but the water that was meant to save only deepened the ruin. The sodden earth began to cave, burying the tunnels further and delaying the search for those still entombed below. For 24 hours, the fire raged. When at last it was extinguished, the grim truth emerged. No one who had remained underground had survived. The rescuers descended into what was left of the tunnels and began the harrowing work of bringing the dead to the surface. Among the first they found was pit boss Richard Roberts. His two brothers William and Robert lay not far from him. 3 sons of Wales, who had mined together since boyhood, now united in death. Then came Joseph Evans, a 35-year-old Welsh miner working his first and only day in Atwater. He left behind a wife and 7 children waiting in Wales for letters that would never come. Others soon followed: Thomas Maines, Joseph Otey, John Williams, John Howells, and John Jones. Names etched forever into the memory of the small Ohio town. By the 4th of July, 7 bodies had been recovered, and any thoughts of celebration had vanished beneath the pall of mourning. The last 3 were found in the early morning hours of July 7th. Among them was little George Hufford. They carried him out of the mud and slime at the bottom of the slope, his small body mangled and blackened by the inferno. George's father survived the disaster, but the emotional loss and perhaps even the guilt must have been devastating in its own right. As dawn broke over Atwater, the crowd stood silent. The Independence Day that was meant to mark freedom had become a day of grief, a town's heart buried beneath its own soil. The following year, the Ohio legislature passed a bill to regulate the coal mining industry. Every mine was to have 2 entrances, speaking tubes for communication, and improved ventilation systems, small safeguards written in the blood and smoke of the Atwater dead. The Atwater coal mine never reopened. Its shafts were sealed, its tools abandoned, and its story nearly buried with the men who died there. Today, a historical marker at the Atwater Cemetery stands in remembrance of that terrible day, honoring those who perished, including young George Hufford. But the marker bears an error, placing the mine south of Route 224 and east of Route 225, when in truth it lies west of 225, as shown in the cartographic works of L.H. Everts for the Portage County Atlas. If you overlay the atlas maps with the Google Maps satellite view of today, you can see how the town of Atwater and the path of Route 224 line up to place us at the head of a narrow, forgotten access road. Time has long since swallowed the site, its scars softened by weeds and silence. No one can say for certain how the fire began. Perhaps the timbers were too dry to withstand the furnace's heat. Perhaps a spark ignited a pocket of methane gas, or perhaps the coal itself, through slow oxidation, burst into spontaneous flame. Whatever the cause, it took only moments to undo what months of labor had built. The disaster at Atwater prompted reform, but it did not end the peril of mining. Over the years to follow, Ohio would endure 18 more mining catastrophes, with the worst being the Millfield mine explosion of 1930, It claimed 82 lives. But the first was here, in a forgotten field in Atwater Township. Maybe the town chose to forget the disaster, staying on its peaceful countryside. But we should never forget the men and the boy who lost their lives that tragic day in 1872. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time as we explore more curious history. Take care.